Hola, everybody. It is I, your Lord and Savior Nero, and today I got something a little bit different for all of you. Now, for those of you that may not know, I am a big fan of the Metal Gear Solid universe. I still haven't played Metal Gear 1 or 2 just yet, but I have played everything else. Currently, I'm actually doing a Let's Play for Metal Gear Solid 5, Ground Zeroes. Unfortunately, the recording curse has kind of been kicking my ass, so hopefully I'll do a little bit better in due time. Anywho, there is something that has really been getting to me as of late, and it's a very particular line from Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. So, without further ado, I'm going to show you that line now. And your son's sons. Wow. So, what is that actually supposed to mean? Well, let's go ahead and try to theorize about that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metal Gear Solid Theory. Is Big Boss a granddad?
Welcome to the Nero Network.
So, before we actually get into the theories that I need to present, we first need to go over two particular things. First off, was this just a throwaway line? Now, this I don't necessarily believe. Pizarro, who was the spirit medium for the Cobra unit spearheaded by the boss, is definitely not stupid when it comes to his own medium powers, I guess I could put it. We're talking about a guy whom even beyond death is able to still have influence and power over those of the living, as seen throughout Metal Gear Solid 3, especially when looking at the boss as Naked Snake. And even if you go into the next game after that, Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops, we also get yet another spirit medium, and I believe Ursula is also able to admit knowledge of the Sons of Big Boss. So, trying to say that the Sorrow's line of Sons is just being a throwaway line doesn't jive with me. It just doesn't seem like it. The only other thing that could be stated is it a retcon? Now, knowing Hideo Kojima, it's very possible, but due to the nature of this video, we're just going to say it's not a retcon and that it does indeed hold weight. So, let's get started on the theories. I'll be starting with some of the simplest ones first, and then moving into the more far-fetched. So this is, of course, the Miracle Baby theory, and it's probably going to be the most simplistic of them, and that basically states that one of these sons of Big Boss, most likely Solid Snake, was indeed able to inseminate a woman. So, of course, this would be a miracle, since if you know anything about the Les Enfants Terribles project, which is what brought about Solid, Liquid, and Solidus Snake, they were all made sterile. Just like Big Boss through the Bikini Atoll testing, which made him sterile, the Patriots did not want the Sons of Big Boss to be able to produce natural offspring. So of course this would indeed be a miracle. But just looking through history, women that have been viewed as barren, men that have had vasectomies, children have been produced by these people. So it's not completely out of left field that someone like Solid Snake wouldn't be able to accidentally knock up a woman, believing that he's sterile, when in fact he was able to at least produce one piece of super sperm that was able to get inside an egg, and boom, we got ourselves a grandkid. course, that leaves you to wonder, well, just who? And why Solid Snake in particular? I say Solid Snake because, well, going through the games that we've seen with him outside of Metal Gear Solid 4 anyway, he's always been kind of shown to be a bit of a playboy. And that's the main reason why I chose him as opposed to Liquid or Solidus. But then again, you also gotta wonder just who would he have done that with? We already know Meryl is not an option. Neither is Emma Emmerich. Meryl, due to the fact that we did indeed see her in Metal Gear Solid 4, and there isn't a single point in which she's like, "Bitch, you never took care of my child." And when it comes to Emma, obviously she died before Snake even got the chance to hit on her. So the only person I can particularly think of is Holly White. For those of you that don't know who she is one of the female protagonists of Metal Gear 2, and is essentially like the proto-Meryl. The two of them did indeed have a connection, and there's nothing particularly stating that they couldn't have gotten together after the Zanzibar Land incident. So the only other questions left is, if that indeed happened, why didn't Snake know about it? Well, there's two answers for this one. The first is a real-world example in which, if a woman doesn't see the father of her child as being worthy of being said father, there are points in time in which they will not let the father know, hey, you got yourself a kid. They would much rather be a single parent without the father ever even knowing that they have a kid. So Holly White could have been just like that, seeing Snake as not necessarily being the father type, and as such decided, I'm not gonna let him know, and as such, Snake went the entirety of his life not knowing that he fathered the child. The second is, of course, that we already know the Patriots were keeping a very close eye on all of the sons of Big Boss, Solid Snake included. Because of this, if they were to find out that their sterile clone was actually able to produce a miracle baby, then who's to say they didn't just take Holly while she was still pregnant, and that's that. We never hear anything about Holly after the events of the Zanzibar Land incident, so the Patriots very well could have abducted her, and the child remains in their care, without anyone knowing that indeed one of the sons of Big Boss had a son. So that's the miracle baby theory. Again, it's very simplistic, but it can indeed work. This is, of course, the unknowns of the Les Enfants Terribles. Now, there's only so much about the Les Enfants Terribles that we do indeed know. There was a very particular timeline for it. We know that there were multiple attempts to what would become Solid and Liquid prior to the successful birth of Solid and Liquid. Or Liquid and Solid, I should say, since that's how they were born. There was that. Solidus was a completely separate thing. Was not produced by the same surrogate mother with the same batch of eggs or whatever. It was a completely separate ordeal that happened sometime after the birth of Liquid and Solid. And what was it? It ended in 1976, 1979, something like that. And that's really all we know about the Les Enfants Terribles in terms of its timeline. So, is it indeed possible that the Patriots could have ended up making other clones that just haven't been revealed as per the series? Yeah. Of course, I don't really like this theory too much because it's one of those cop-out ones. Like, oh yeah, we know we've been saying there's only 3 sons of Big Boss and blah blah blah, but hey, guess what? There's actually 19, But, of course, we're talking about sons. So the only way that theory would be able to work is if some of these additional sons either didn't have the Terminator genes in them and successful clones of them were made, or they weren't made sterile and they were able to produce their own natural offspring. But again, very simplistic theory. This next theory is known, of course, as you already seen, as the technological advancements theory. Now, the Les Enfants Terribles project, of course, took place during the 1970s, and as real world will show you, technology is constantly improving, becoming much better. Things that were once seen as impossible are now very possible. During, the 70s, you had computers that would, take up most of a wall. But nowadays, you can have these computers that you can hold in the palm of your hands, essentially. Tablets. Back in that day, no one would have imagined that. Hell, cell phones were initially envisioned in Star Trek. So there's always technological advances. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, because there is another portion of the Les Enfants Terribles that I didn't bring up earlier. Along with ensuring that all the sons of Big Boss were made sterile, they were also made with what are known as Terminator genes. Now, I'm not going to try to get into this because I'm not even sure if the series itself did, but in essence, the Terminator genes make it so that it's impossible to clone the clones. But, again, we're talking about the technology of the 1970s. So who's to say, as time went on, technology didn't advance enough that anybody that was really interested in trying to create clones of these clones, that they couldn't just try to find a way to bypass the Terminator genes. I mean, even if it has to take me so far ahead that we're talking about the Ryzen universe, where the Patriots have already fallen, they're not there anymore, so we don't have information control any longer. Advances could have been made enough to actually bypass the Terminator genes and thus make clones of the clones. But this could have been something that happened at any point in time after the Les Enfants Terribles. All it takes is just any party that's interested in being able to make their own clones of these clones. This theory, as stated, is the spiritual grandson theory. Now, let's actually take a look at the character of Solidus. He, of course, was much more controlled by the Patriots than any of the other clones of Big Boss were. During his army days, you could say, I believe it was when he was in Liberia, he had an army. It was like Army of the Devils or something. He had an army that was comprised entirely of child soldiers. One of these soldiers was named Jack, and was given special tutelage by Solidus Snake himself. This, in turn, as was admitted by Solidus Snake, essentially made this child, Jack, who had become known as Jack the Ripper, as Solidus Snake's spiritual son. Now, of course, that would actually, by definition, make him the spiritual grandson of Big Boss. But we're already at a standstill. It's been stated already by the Sorrow, sons. Plural. Raiden's just a single person, so how could he, Jack the Ripper, represent sons if he's just a single person? Well, that's when we go in a little bit deeper. You see, Jack the Ripper was of the direct influence of Solidus Snake. This influence continued onwards into the plant chapter, also known as the S3 plan, of the Patriots. However, we also had Solid Snake in there, whom, by the end of the game, was teaching Raiden himself. Obviously he went by the codename Raiden by this point. So you can indeed say that Jack the Ripper and the Raiden that we see partially during the S3 plan is the spiritual son of Solidus Snake. But by the end of the S3 plan, and through the entirety of Metal Gear Solid 4, we're seeing Raiden under the tutelage of Solid Snake. Thus, we kinda have Solid Snake's spiritual son in Raiden. Because of that, a single person can now represent two different sons. Because we got Jack the Ripper via Solidus Snake, and our modern day Raiden via Solid Snake. So because of that, we can actually indeed think of Raiden as being exactly what the Sara was mentioning in Sons. But now, let's try to go a little more far-fetched, shall we? This is, of course, the Dr. Clark theory. Now, Dr. Clark has pretty much always been interested in Naked Snake, who would later on become Big Boss. And one of the things, as you can actually get from certain codec calls, is she does have a bit of a fetish in terms of Naked Snake's legacy. Of course, she already knew that Naked Snake was, he was sterile. He can't produce his own natural offspring. So any kind of legacy that he were to bring about would have to be artificial in nature. So you would think by the time of the Les Enfants Terribles that Dr. Clark would have gotten exactly what she wanted in being able to create the Sons of Big Boss. However, Les Enfants Terribles was spearheaded by Zero, whom had his own ideas about what to do, which would then bring about Solid, Liquid, and Solidus. That doesn't exactly mesh completely, however, with Dr. Clark, who truly wanted to have a legacy. Because of this, with the sterility and the Terminator genes, there isn't a truly valid legacy because it can't continue. If I have a child, unless that child happens to be sterile, that child's gonna have a child, that child's gonna have a child, etc. I got my legacy. I'm continuing my family's legacy. But Solid, Liquid, and Solidus don't have that means, even artificially, because of Terminator genes. Unless you take the technological advancements theory into the forte. So, is it possible that Dr. Clark would have gone behind Zero and the Patriots' back to create her own clones without the knowledge of everybody else? Indeed, it can be. She already had all the means to do so. All she would have needed is just having some other mother, apparently. Hell, she could have used herself if she really felt like it. This next theory is definitely out there, the truly aborted theory. Now again, we need to delve in a little deeper into the Les Enfants Terribles. As was revealed, Solid and Liquid were twins. They were born from the same batch of babies through Eva, who was the surrogate mother, etc., etc. The way that they were born was through the Super Baby method. Super Baby method incorporates a total of 8 fetuses to be placed inside a surrogate mother, Eva at this standpoint, and 6 of them intentionally get aborted to allow for even greater growth of the remaining 2, which would become Liquid and Solid. But is it possible, again, because of Dr. Clark, that these fetuses, the aborted fetuses, could have been kept alive in some fashion to allow them to be born as a test tube baby or through another mother that was kept secret from Zero and the Patriots? With this in mind, she easily could have ensured that they didn't have Terminator genes, they didn't have sterility, just like the Dr. Clark theory, and these unknown children of Big Boss could have easily gone out and, impregnated other women, thus granting the sons. But there's a theory that goes even further than that, but still goes on the same type of lines. This, as was stated, is the fetus clone theory. This is probably one of my favorite of the far-fetched theories regarding the Sorrow's line of sons, and actually has a little more credence than what I would say the Dr. Clark and the truly aborted theories have. So what's the fetus clone theory? Well, just as it would sound. Of course, we had the super baby method. 6 fetuses were aborted to allow for greater growth of liquid and solid. These fetuses, however, are still going to have the DNA and genetic code of Big Boss. So again, Dr. Clark easily could have taken said genes, DNA, etc., kept them to herself without the knowledge of Zero and the Patriots, and thus create more clones. These being the sons of the sons. So you would truly have the grandsons of Big Boss. And to make it even better, they wouldn't have anything truly to do with liquid or solid, which makes it even better since you don't actually have to say, oh, this is the son of solid snake, this is the son of liquid snake. No, this is a son of a snake that never came to be. This is its own original thing, but still a grandson by default. This is definitely a theory I love, and it's just far-fetched enough, I believe, to work. And just to make it even that much better, you have the grandsons that could have been born right around the same time as the sons. Now ain't that some shit? This last theory is also pretty far-fetched, but one that actually started the whole idea of the theories. So this was my initial theory, actually, and that is the reject clone theory. So again, we know how liquid and solid came to be because of the super baby method. However, we don't know anything about the method that Solidus Snake came to be from. Now, most people could just say, well, you know, he was made specifically as a single fetus, and all that. Okay. Maybe he was done under the super baby method, but instead of aborting 6 fetuses, they aborted 7 to allow for the best growth of just the one, which would become Solidus. But that again goes against the whole reject clone theory, so yeah. But what if they actually kept it under the exact same method? This, of course, uses the whole mentality of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if they already know that the super baby method leaving 2 fetuses alive to be born works, then why not do the same thing when it comes to Solidus? Solidus was, of course, made to be a perfect clone of Big Boss. So that would make you wonder, then what about the second fetus? The other survivor? What would he get, if anything? Well, you hear that and you think, well, what's going to happen is you got yourself a stillborn. But we're also talking about Metal Gear Solid, in which pretty much everything can be attributed to nanomachines. So I wouldn't be surprised if, even if this clone had almost nothing to do with Big Boss, except maybe like junk data of Big Boss, you could say, could still be viable enough for birth, and thus you got yourself a reject clone. This is a clone that the Patriots probably wouldn't have given 2 shits about. As such, who's to say that he wouldn't have had the Terminator genes and the sterility incurred in the same manner as Liquid, Solid, and Solidus had. Because of that, again, this reject clone could have easily been able to impregnate another woman, hopefully through marriage or at the very least love, because do we really need a rape story in this? But either way, could have had, had a child of its own, and thus we got the sons. Maybe this reject clone was treated in a very similar manner without the sterility and Terminator genes that the others had, just the Patriots didn't care enough to keep watch over this reject clone because, again, it's a reject. You know, hand it off to a foster family and then just let them care for it as much as they want. Maybe enough to become a soldier, but not enough to really care to watch over it. Can't really say that it couldn't happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are my theories on just, the sons. I would love to be able to hear what any of you have to say. Do you have any of your own personal theories? Do you believe that Big Boss could indeed be a granddad? That the Sorrow was being perfectly honest when he said sons? Or was it indeed just a throwaway line? Did Hideo Kojima decide to retcon it, or is it still there to some degree, just kept on the back burner until he realizes what he can do with it? Did Snake have some super sperm and produce a miracle baby? Is there a reject clone out there that perhaps had his own? Maybe the snakes that never been were able to have their own sons through the use of Dr. Clark. Or perhaps Raiden is the son's son. And we just haven't delved into that yet, or we don't need to. It's something that we need to figure out on our own. Who knows? There could be any number of theories, and I would love to be able to hear what any of you have to say. Do you agree or disagree with any of them? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of disagreements, but hey, you know what? This video is also made for fun. Anywho, I am your Lord and Savior Nero, and if you like this video, then please, by all means, leave a like, comment, favorite, and of course subscribe. I'm always looking for more. Anywho, I shall see you when I feel like it.
Well, if you make it back in one piece, maybe I'll let you do a strip search on me.